Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. He had that look again, the one that always made my pulse misbehave, even after years of saying goodnight like it was routine. We were alone in the dining room, the overhead light dimmed low enough to turn everything honey-colored. His hand slid to my waist as if it belonged there, thumb tracing slow circles through the fabric of my dress. I should have stepped away. I didn't. Still wearing that perfume, he murmured, leaning in close enough that his breath warmed the corner of my mouth, close enough that I could feel the smile he refused to show. He didn't kiss me yet. He just hovered, letting the almost kiss do the talking. I tipped my chin up, teasing. Maybe I knew you'd notice. His eyes flicked to my lips, then back to my gaze. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was loaded, like the pause before lightning. His fingers tightened, pulling me into the small space between his knees and the edge of the table. The wood pressed cool against the back of my thighs. I rested my palms on it anyway, grounding myself while he unhurriedly watched me like I was a secret he was deciding whether to keep. "Tell me what you want," he said softly, as if it was a game. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "You." The corner of his mouth finally lifted. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, and the tenderness of that simple touch made my stomach flip harder than anything else. I thought this was our private moment, our familiar heat, our usual push and pull. Then I saw the second glass on the sideboard. And the other place setting. And the way his gaze didn't just linger on me, it measured the room. A knock came, 2 quick taps, like someone who already knew they were welcome. My husband didn't flinch. He didn't even look toward the door at first. He just watched my reaction, his arms folding across his chest with a calm that felt rehearsed. My skin prickled. "You're tense," he observed, almost amused. "Who's here?" I asked, though my voice came out smaller than I meant. He stood, slow and deliberate, and I felt the absence of his warmth like a sudden draft. He walked to the door without speaking. No explanation. No warning. Just that steady, controlled stride. And then he opened it. The man on the other side wasn't a stranger. My breath caught, because of course it was him. My husband's best friend, leaning in with that easy confidence like he'd always belonged in our home. Before I could form a sentence, my husband stepped aside again, widening the opening. And behind him, heels clicking softly on the floor, stood his wife. She took one look at us, at me braced against the table, at my husband's unreadable calm. Her purse slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. Then, without a word, she sank down, right onto my husband's lap, like she'd been waiting her whole life for permission. My heart dropped so hard it felt like it cracked. Because in that instant, I understood. This wasn't a surprise. It was a plan. And whatever was about to happen, it was never about me alone. Her weight settled on his lap like it was the most natural place in the world, and my husband's hands, those steady hands, didn't hesitate. One arm slid around her lower back, not hungry, not frantic, practiced. Like they'd rehearsed this in some quiet corner of their lives I'd never been invited into. I stared at them, my palms still flat on the table, fingers curled at the edge as if the wood could keep me upright. My husband's best friend stepped inside and shut the door behind them with a soft click that sounded final. He didn't rush. He didn't gloat. He just looked at me the way a man looks at a match he's been holding in his pocket all day, warm, dangerous, inevitable. "You're shaking," he said gently, voice low enough to feel like a hand at my throat without touching. "Are you scared, or excited?" My breath hitched. "I don't know what this is." My husband finally spoke, calm as ever. "It's honesty." That word landed wrong. Like a key turning in a lock I didn't recognize. His wife, still on his lap, tilted her head back slightly, eyes half-lidded, lips close to his ear. She whispered something I couldn't hear, and my husband's jaw tightened for a brief second before smoothing out again. That tiny crack in his control made my stomach flip harder than any touch. The best friend walked closer, slow, hands visible, almost polite. He stopped just short of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, clean, dark, familiar from too many dinners and birthdays and nights where we'd laughed like we were all harmless. He leaned in, not kissing me, just letting his mouth brush my ear with a near miss. "You've wondered," he murmured. "Haven't you?" I swallowed, heat rising in my face. "Wondered what?" He smiled like he loved the question. "What it would feel like if the rules didn't apply. If you didn't have to be the good wife. If you could just take what you want." Behind him, I heard the soft shift of fabric, the faint creak of the chair. My husband's hands moved again, one settling at the woman's waist, the other lifting her chin with a tenderness that made my chest ache. She looked at me then, and there wasn't cruelty there. There was something else. Permission. Or maybe a warning. My husband met my eyes across the room, his gaze steady, almost intimate in its own cold way. "Do you trust me?" he asked. I let out a small laugh that sounded like it belonged to someone braver. "That's a loaded question." His expression softened, just enough to make it worse. "Answer it anyway." The best friend's fingers brushed my wrist, light, testing, a question without words. My pulse leapt under his touch. I didn't pull away. And then my husband said, so quietly it barely reached me, "If you say yes, you don't get to pretend you didn't choose this." My mouth went dry. Because in that moment, I realized the secret wasn't that they wanted each other. The secret was that my husband had been waiting to see what I would do. My husband's words hung in the air like a dare I couldn't unhear. I felt the best friend's thumb pulse lightly at my wrist, steady, patient, while my eyes stayed locked on my husband as if I could read the truth off his face. "Choose," my husband repeated, softer this time. Not cruel. Not loud. Worse than that, intimate. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened. My mind flashed through every dinner we'd shared with them, every laugh, every casual touch I'd dismissed as friendly. The way his wife used to look at my husband when she thought no one noticed. The way my husband always seemed too calm when his best friend's hand brushed my shoulder in the kitchen. "You planned this," I finally whispered, and it came out like an accusation and a confession at once. My husband's gaze didn't waver. "We talked," he said. "A long time ago." His wife shifted on his lap, fingers grazing his collar as if she belonged there. "Not like this," she murmured, eyes on me now. "Not at first." The best friend angled closer, close enough that his chest nearly touched mine. "You've been watching," he said, voice silk smooth. "You've been wondering why he doesn't get jealous when other men look at you." My stomach dropped. Because I had wondered. Not in a cute, harmless way, more like a bruise you press to check if it still hurts. My husband leaned back in the chair, one hand resting at his wife's waist, the other draped along the armrest like he was settling in for a show. "I do get jealous," he said quietly. That admission hit harder than I expected. My heart stuttered. He continued, slow and deliberate. "I just don't do jealousy the way you think I should." His wife's eyes flicked to him, something sharp and private passed between them. Old arguments. Old agreements. I saw it in the way her lips pressed together before she looked back at me with a half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You think I cheated," I blurted, because the thought had lived in my chest for months like a splinter. "Is that what this is? A punishment?" My husband's face tightened, finally, a crack. "I think you've been hiding something," he said. "And I'm tired of guessing." The best friend's hand slid from my wrist to the side of my waist, light pressure, guiding me a step closer to the table again, like he was placing me back into the moment. My skin lit up where he touched. I hated that it felt good. "Hiding what?" I asked, breathy despite myself. My husband's eyes dipped to my mouth. Tell me, he said. Or show me. His wife's purse still lay open on the floor, lipstick rolling out like a little red warning. She reached down, picked it up, then looked at me with a calm that felt terrifying. We're not here to steal, she said. We're here to trade. The room tilted. My pulse thundered. The best friend's breath warmed my cheek as he whispered, almost playful, unless you don't want to be chosen. And my husband, watched me like the next move would decide everything we'd ever been. My breath came in shallow pulls, like the room had less air than it used to. The best friend's hand stayed at my waist, firm enough to make my body listen, gentle enough to feel like a question. I felt my husband watching, not blinking, like he was measuring every flicker of hesitation in my face. His wife slipped off his lap slowly and stood, smoothing her skirt as if this was just another evening. But her eyes were bright. Too bright. She walked toward me with careful steps, stopping close, so close I could see the tiny shimmer on her lashes. You're not the only one who's been wondering, she whispered, and the softness of her voice made my skin prickle. I saw it in you. The way you hold your breath when he walks behind you. The way you pretend you didn't notice. My pulse jumped. I didn't. She lifted her hand and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, mirroring the gesture my husband had done earlier. It shouldn't have felt intimate. It did. You did, she said, almost kindly. And he did too. My husband's best friend leaned closer, his mouth near my cheek, not touching, just close enough to make my thoughts blur. Tell the truth, he murmured. Just once. My husband rose from the chair. The scrape of it against the floor sounded loud in the silence. He crossed the room in 3 calm steps, stopping behind me, so close his warmth pressed into my back without contact. His hand reached around, settling over mine on the table edge, fingers threading through like he was reminding me whose name I wore on my ring. Look at me, he said. I turned my head. His eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them, not angry, hungry in a way that made my chest tighten. You think this is about them, he continued, voice low. It isn't. His wife's hand slid down my arm, slow, deliberate, stopping at my wrist, right where his best friend had touched me. 2 points of contact, 2 different currents running through the same skin. My stomach flipped. Then what is it about? My husband's thumb brushed the inside of my palm. A small touch, but it made my knees threaten to give. It's about you choosing me, he said, even when temptation is standing in front of you. The best friend let out a quiet laugh, warm against my ear. Or choosing yourself, he corrected, playful, dangerous. A new sound cut through the heat, my phone buzzing on the counter. Once. Twice. I froze. All 4 of us did, like the world had put a hand on our shoulders and whispered, not so fast. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't said out loud in months. My husband saw it over my shoulder. I felt his body go still behind me, the air changing like a storm rolling in. Who is that? He asked. And before I could answer, the doorbell rang again, longer this time, followed by the unmistakable rattle of a key trying the lock. His wife's eyes widened. The best friend's hand tightened at my waist. My husband's voice dropped to something sharp and calm. Tell me right now, he said, or we're about to find out together. The rattle at the lock stopped for half a second, then started again, more impatient now. My phone kept buzzing like it was trying to crawl off the counter. The glowing screen felt like an accusation in the dim room. My husband's hand tightened over mine, not painful, just absolute. Answer me, he said, voice low and controlled, but I heard the edge underneath. Who is that? I stared at the name, pulse sprinting. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't a coworker. It was the one person who could turn this whole night from dangerous to disastrous. It's my sister, I lied, too fast. His best friend exhaled a soft laugh against my cheek, like he could taste the lie. His wife's fingers paused on my arm, then slid down to my wrist again, as if she was holding me steady, or holding me in place. My husband leaned in until his mouth was near my ear, his breath feathering over the skin there. "Don't do that," he murmured. "Not tonight." The bell rang again, longer. Then a voice, muffled through the door, called my name. My stomach dropped so hard I felt it in my knees. My husband's eyes flicked to the entryway, then back to me, sharper now. "That doesn't sound like your sister." My lips parted, but nothing came out. The truth climbed up my throat and stuck. His wife stepped closer, her shoulder brushing mine, warm and steady. "We don't have time," she whispered, eyes darting to the door. "If that's who I think it is, don't," my husband cut in quietly. A warning. A boundary. Or maybe a crack in the plan. My phone buzzed again, and this time my husband reached past me and picked it up. He didn't answer. He just looked at the name, and something in his face shifted, like the floor moved under him, but he refused to stumble. "Oh," he said softly. One syllable, heavy as a confession. My chest tightened. "I can explain." He didn't look away from the screen. "You brought him into this." His voice wasn't loud. That was the terrifying part. "After everything you accused me of, you brought him here." The best friend's hand slid higher on my waist, thumb pressing a small, grounding circle through the fabric, too intimate for the moment, too steady to be an accident. My body responded before my pride could stop it. Heat rose under my skin, and I hated myself for it. "I didn't bring him," I said, breath shaking. "I told him not to come." The key turned in the lock. All four of us moved at once. My husband stepped forward, blocking the doorway with his body like a wall. His wife reached behind her and switched off the dining light, plunging the room into softer shadow, leaving only the warm spill from the hallway lamp. The best friend guided me back a step, close to him, close enough that my back brushed his chest for a split second, an electric, forbidden contact. The door cracked open. A silhouette filled it, broad shoulders, familiar stance. The man's eyes adjusted to the dim. He took one step in. And then he froze. His gaze landed on me first, dress rumpled, lips flushed, one hand still on the table like I'd been bracing for impact. Then his eyes moved to my husband's best friend standing too close, and to the wife hovering near my husband like she belonged there. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, voice tight. My husband didn't move aside. "You shouldn't be here," he replied. The man's jaw flexed, and in that tense second I recognized the real risk. Not gossip, not scandal, but something rawer. History. Grudges. A secret I hadn't fully understood. He looked at me again, and the hurt in his eyes hit like a slap. "So this is what you do when you think you're being lied to?" he asked. "You start a new lie." My husband's hand lifted, slowly, and cupped my chin, forcing my eyes back to his. The touch was tender, possessive, and it made my breath catch in the worst, most confusing way. "Tell him," my husband whispered, so close only I could hear. "Tell him whose choice this is." Behind me, the best friend's lips brushed the air near my temple, barely there, a promise without contact. His voice was a murmur meant only for me. "Say the word, and we stop. Or we don't." My heart hammered so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Because the second twist wasn't the man at the door. It was my husband's eyes, burning, steady, almost pleading, like he wanted me to choose in front of him. In front of all of them. Right as the man at the door took another step inside, ready to explode, my husband's fingers tightened gently under my chin and he whispered, "Now." My husband's fingers under my chin didn't force me. They anchored me, steady enough that the shaking in my chest finally had somewhere to land. I met his eyes and saw it all at once, the months of quiet distance, the questions he never asked out loud, the way he'd been waiting for me to stop pretending everything was fine. The man at the door, my ex, stood frozen, anger and disbelief fighting across his face. So you really moved on, he said, bitter. With an audience. My throat tightened. You don't get to call it that, I shot back, surprised by my own voice. You don't get to show up here like you still own the right to wreck my nights. My husband's gaze flicked to him, then back to me. Soft. Proud. Like he'd been waiting for that spine in me to finally show itself. The best friend behind me went still, like even his breathing didn't want to interrupt. His wife's hand hovered at my elbow, a silent support. My ex stepped forward, but my husband moved first, one calm step that made a clear line in the floor. Stop, he said. Not loud. Final. The room held its breath. My ex's eyes searched my face, then dropped to my husband's hand at my chin, and something in him cracked into something uglier. This is your game, he snapped at my husband. Humiliate her so she stays. My husband didn't flinch. He only turned his head slightly, still close to me, and said quietly, if you came to pull her backward, you're too late. Then he looked at me again, and his voice softened, just for me. Tell him. The truth rose up, hot and terrifying. I swallowed and let it out clean. I didn't invite you, I said to my ex, my hands finally leaving the table as I straightened. I don't need you to rescue me from my own choices. You're here because you couldn't stand the idea that I might be happy without you. Silence. Then my ex's shoulders sagged a fraction, like the fight drained out of him when it didn't land. His gaze flicked once around the room, at the other couple, the dim light, the tension still humming, and he let out a rough breath. Fine, he muttered. Message received. He backed toward the door, but before he left, his eyes caught on the woman standing beside my husband, his best friend's wife, who had been too quiet for too long. She met his stare and, for the first time, smiled like she'd been waiting. Don't slam it, she said calmly. The neighbors are nosy. My ex blinked. Do I know you? Her smile widened. Not yet. He left, the door closing with a soft click that felt like a cord snapping. And then, like the whole house exhaled, my husband pulled me into him, chest to chest. No hesitation. No performance. His hands slid to my waist, holding me like he'd been starving for permission, and I melted against him, breath catching in relief and heat and something dangerously close to joy. I chose, I whispered into his neck. He kissed my forehead first, gentle, shaking, then lifted my face and kissed me like an answer, like an apology, like the end of a long fight neither of us wanted to win. Behind us, a quiet laugh, his best friend's, low and satisfied. That, he murmured, was the real test. I pulled back just enough to look at my husband. Test. His eyes flicked to the other couple. Then back to me. And that's when his wife, still calm, still glowing, reached into her purse and set something on the table, a small velvet box. My ring box. Empty. My stomach dropped. My husband's voice was a whisper, almost tender. Now we start telling the whole truth. My eyes stayed on the empty ring box like it had teeth. The room was quiet except for the sound of my own breathing, too fast, too loud, too exposed. My husband kept his hands at my waist, but the hold changed. Less possessive, more protective. Like he was bracing for the impact of whatever came next. Why is that? I started, then my voice failed. I swallowed. Why is my ring box empty? His best friend's wife, still composed, still watching me like she knew exactly how close I was to breaking, rested her fingertips on the velvet lid. Because secrets don't stay small, she said softly. They grow teeth. They bite later. My husband's best friend shifted, that earlier confidence fading into something more human. Nobody was trying to hurt you, he added, quieter now. This started as a question. My husband nodded once, jaw tight. I asked them to be here, he admitted. Not to trap you. To keep me honest. My stomach twisted. Honest about what? He exhaled and finally let his forehead rest against mine. The closeness made my eyes sting, because even now, even after the chaos, my body still trusted him before my mind could catch up. I've been scared, he whispered. Not of you leaving. Of you staying while you're lonely beside me. That hit me harder than the empty box ever could. I pulled back enough to see his face. His eyes were glossy, furious with himself. So you set up a test? I asked, and my voice shook with a mix of anger and something dangerously close to relief. He shook his head quickly. Not a test of your loyalty, he said. A test of our honesty. I wanted to know if we could say the things we keep swallowing. I wanted to know if you'd tell me the truth, before it turned into something we couldn't undo. His best friend's wife slid the ring box toward me. Inside the lid, tucked into the lining, was a folded note. My hands trembled as I opened it. 3 lines, written in my husband's handwriting. I didn't take it from you. I took it for us. If you choose me, I'll choose you back, with no more games. My throat closed. The anger softened into something raw and aching. My husband reached into his pocket and pulled out my ring, safe, warm from his skin. He held it in his palm like an offering instead of a claim. I was going to give it back tomorrow, he said, voice rough. After we talked. After we finally said what we'd been avoiding. But tonight happened, and I'm done waiting. The other couple stepped back, quietly, respectfully, like they understood this part didn't belong to them anymore. His best friend's wife gave me a small nod, no smugness, no victory, just a strange kind of solidarity. Then she touched her husband's arm, and together they moved toward the hallway, leaving the dining room to us and the soft pool of light. My husband sank to one knee, not dramatic, almost shy about it, and looked up at me like I was still the choice he wanted most. Stay, he said simply. Not out of habit. Not out of fear. Stay because you want me. Tears slipped down before I could stop them. I laughed through it, breathless and real. I want you, I whispered. But I want the truth with you. He nodded, eyes shining. You get all of me, he promised. I slid the ring back onto my finger myself, slow and deliberate, then reached down and pulled him up by his shirt. He stumbled into me, and I kissed him, soft at first, then deeper, tasting the relief in the way he held me like he'd been forgiven. When we finally broke apart, we stayed forehead to forehead, smiling like 2 people who had survived their own worst silence. Outside, the world stayed ordinary. Inside, we were something newly honest. And as he carried me out of the dining room, my ring catching the light with every step, he whispered, no more locked doors between us. I tucked my face into his neck, heart full and steady. Good, I murmured. Because I'm home.